Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show, it's about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of American Rust. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, there's the autopsy performed on Pete. And obviously, everyone's gathered around, including Sue, about trying to figure out, like, okay, so what happened to him? Obviously, like, he got beaten, like, punched in the face and stuff like that, but it seems like it was blunt force trauma that finally killed him, the blow to the back of his head. So it turns out, in his body, there was a whole bunch of drugs. So, it's like, yeah, if he hadn't gotten killed, he would have eventually died from all these drugs, like, you know, anyway. So he even has fentanyl in his system and stuff like that. So he's been a drug user for multiple years, which Sue's like, oh, you employed someone who, it's like, I took him to his meetings and stuff like that. He was doing good. And it's like, because like Dale kind of let a lot of stuff, I guess, up until like Dale had fired him, he was backsliding in other ways. Maybe not necessarily drugs, but like, you know, I think that just all, like, he was already swerving and he just like completely went off course the moment Dale fired him. But it, you know, but it's like, yeah, it's like, yo, won't bring me up on charges. You know where, basically Dale is like, you know where to find me type of situation. So he wants to drop off all of Pete's belongings to Pam, which he does. And she's like, he kept the ring. He broke into our house. He stole the TV, the Blu-ray, and so basically to sell it for drugs, but he kept the ring, you know. And it's like, you know, Dale's asking, like, you know, do you have a family plan so I can see who Pete might have been calling? And she's like, right, I find it so fascinating that you care about, you know, Pete and everything now, but you weren't there when he was spiraling after you fired him. Now, I'm surprised because that's the thing. I was halfway expecting these conversations to pop up because, like, Pam was kind of giving Dale that look last episode, but I guess because it was a wedding and everything, she never, you know, trying to like some, like, you know, pleasantries of trying not to like, I get, or rather social graces of like, probably trying not to air her circumstances like out and issues with Dale, but it is a thing of like, right, like he spiraled because you fired him and you weren't really there for him then. Like, obviously, he was already slipping and sliding, and obviously, Pam's circumstances with Pete were complicated. Really complicated. So it's like, but it's a thing of like, it's like, well, he was already kind of messing up, but at the same time, from an outside perspective, it's like, right, but you doing what you didn't help. Well, not even from an outside perspective, from the inside perspective, I should rather say. It can be understandable of like, right, you didn't kind of help the situation, you kind of worsened it, so. I guess because Dale knows that, at the very least, Billy is in a mix of this, he is trying to get ahead on the investigation, so, like, he's trying to get further than Frank. Obviously, like, no one else is aware of that, because, like, Steve can tell, like, that Dale is a little more agitated than more, and even he admits that when he was talking to the doctor about, like, right, the pill that he found, it's like, right, that's fentanyl, pretty strong stuff, you know, it's usually, like, what people go to when Oxy just isn't cutting it anymore, so. But he's keeping it, because he's saying, like, oh yeah, I got it from a drug raid, so obviously still trying to, like, hide the fact is that it's connected to the, that particular case, because also it means he's carrying around evidence he hasn't officially registered and stuff like that. Dale kind of beats to his own drum, because it's like, right, I haven't found anything either, because Sue was like, oh, so did you inform Frank about that? He's like, I'm informing him now that I didn't find anything, but, because I had talked about this, because the scene when Pete got his autopsy and you see like them marking the board and it saying homicide, but every other death up there was drug overdose. Like, that's what I was talking. I talked about that a little bit. I guess it's like the only like recent murder in town we don't know like what the murder rate is. It seems like most deaths in this town end up being drug overdoses. So Pete was probably at the heart of the drug epidemic. Because that was also Sue's point of like, right, you kept employing a cop who was drugged out during a drug epidemic, and it's like, yeah, there is probably a correlation in between. I mean, well, that means like this was already happening, but the question is like, obviously Pete was a big user, but I would assume most drug dealers don't. The whole point is not to get high on your own supply, so like he was just a buyer, and it seems like the guy, which we find out later on, his name is Bobby. We learned it from Carl. Which every time I say that now, I want to say it like Andrew Lincoln, or rather like Rick does in The Walking Dead. Carl. Like, I feel like I say it like that even when I don't try to. And I just say, Carl. Like, I feel like I feel like I say it. I don't know. But I love that Carl's trying to be like, no, I'm off that stuff. He's like, I gave you a hit. Shouldn't you kind of give me a reward or something? He's like, for this, like, the bare minimum information, like some hotel, some place here. And he's like, it might be this or name this or something. It's like, see, you don't got to worry about me, Dale. I'm off that stuff. And he's like, damn. Like, I guess he was hoping that Dale would give him some money so that he could afford to buy drugs, even though he's like, yeah, I gotta go groceries. I love that you say that literally as you're sniffling and wiping your nose. I'm like, at least separate the two before you, like, at least do that when you're not like, oh, I gotta get groceries. Don't do it at the same time you're wiping and sniffling, you know? So I think that's fascinating. Which they did track the guy down, but his name Bobby, but he ended up getting away. But for Dale, it's like, he's like, I want this guy before anyone else because he wants to know maybe Bobby might have been at the crime scene and might have witnessed it. So he's trying to, like, cover, like, cross all his T's, dot his I's and cross all his T's. Now, my question is, like, is he trying to do that because he's trying to stay one step ahead of the investigation covering for Billy? Or is it a situation of, because he's making it seem like, because this isn't necessarily for Pete's sake. Frank is coming at it from like, it's like, yeah, I mean, it's like Pete might have been messed up and all that, yada, yada, yada. He did get murdered, so we got to give that our all. Too, he is technically one of our own, so there's that element to it. Because it's interesting how that kind of ties in with, like, Dale's past, which we learned about from Grace, because Grace talks about the fact is, like, he doesn't talk about his emotions. I did love that whole thing about, like, she's like, right, she talked about her mom having, like, Feelings Friday. Like, basically, at the end of the week, her father would have to, like, point to the chart, like, of the 20 emotions and have to say, like, what emotion he felt and on what day. And it's like, and because she heard about, like, right, he just picked up and left his job in Pittsburgh, and it's like, right, you see a lot of terrible stuff. And so he talks about the case in particular and how that ended up being the, you know, tragic situation that it was just like, right, because there's technically no witnesses to a crime, there is technically no crime. It's like, it's just like, like, I get, because it's also, we were talking about an 8-year-old boy, so it's like, that's, you know, who was literally so traumatized that seeing the teacher touch his wife's leg made him pee his pants. Like, that's, you know, it's like, shouldn't that context be taken into account? Like, shouldn't, you know, maybe, whatever the case may be, the case was dropped. He ended up moving before there ended up being anything, but the cops from his unit ended up, you know, going to that guy. It's like, right, make sure you're at a bar, basically make sure you have a good alibi, and they went there and they killed him. And so basically when he joined that, he took an oath of like, hey, we'll be there for each other's cases. Like, for those who slip through the system, you know, we do, like, yo, you do it for me, don't worry, I'm gonna do it for you. And they did it for Dell. Because for him, like, the grid is like, I didn't stop it. I could have been like, no, thank you, but I let it happen. And so, like, for him, it's like, I had to leave before someone, like, before I find myself in a situation where I would do that. I would do that for someone else, because it's like, because of what the badge represents and everything. And then the fact is that here we are, like, that we could just, with a badge, go outside of the law and just do whatever we want to. And like that, like, once again, them having his back to make sure that he had a alibi. Which she was like, hey, you got yourself out of a bad situation. Most people don't have the courage to do that. Which I find ironic, considering, like, and I think that's the whole point of them telling you that story too, is like, I guess, because he got himself out of a bad situation, he's trying to do the same thing for Billy. Is it because when he looks at Billy, he sees himself? Or is it just simply because it's like, right, Grace, because you have a thing for Grace and you want to help her out? Like, that's why I'm like, when there's something between you two, it doesn't make your, like, helping Billy seem selfless. But it's also like, right, you are a cop kind of going against your job and kind of doing some shady business. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm curious to get the insight. Like, is it purely because of the whole Pittsburgh situation? Is it because of Grace? Is it a combination of the two? Like, what specifically is going through his mind about why he wants to help Billy? Is it just because it's Billy and it's like, right, I just want him, Like, you're a kid that was in a bad situation. You were kind of dealt a bad hand. Like, I mean, he was there for Billy during that whole situation that landed him on probation in the first place. So, I don't know. But speaking of Grace, like, I think what kind of sparked all of this conversation with Dell is because she was at the bowling alley and she was looking at all the people coupled up. And I think for her, it's a thing of, like, she wants more. Like, then, like, oh, let's shag every once in a while situation that she has with Virgil. Then there was also, like, the whole, like, situation with Dell, too. Like, I think she wants, like, she doesn't want just, like, a fling. She wants companionship, you know? So, especially when that dude rolls up and starts hitting on Bethany hard, you know? But other than that, they are trying to get a lawyer so that they can form a union and get better wages and conditions and health insurance and stuff like that for their job. Especially for Grace, it's like she's been working this job so long, you know, that, like, her hands are, like, damaged from it. So they have to, they got, like, 30 signatures, but they need at least, like, 20 more, because they basically need, like, a vote of, like, a majority, like 51%, so they need at least, like, 20 more signatures, to get a majority of the people on their side. And they're talking to someone, because it's like, right, the workers that don't want to mess with their situation, because, like, right, like, it's like, right, like, what was her name, Josephina? Was it something like, yeah, I think so. She was like, yeah, my mom and my aunts, like, some of them have green cards in here on visas, like, they're not trying to screw that situation up, because it's like, if we sign up as a part of this, then, Mr. Greasley has every excuse to fire us, which, like, no, the lawyer will tell you, like, he can't do that, like, so, but even then, Grace was upfront by being like, right, I'm trying to make sure I have some money saved up for retirement. And I'm sure, like, I mean, that's about what this is for everybody, not just me, but you, your mom, your aunt, like, just, you know. And she says, like, right, I'll try to talk to them. So we'll see where that kind of goes as kind of a subplot. I don't know how and if that will connect to the overarching plot, or will that just be like one of those smaller storylines. Like, I don't know if this is going to be one of those stories, you know, that even the how do I want to phrase it? Like, the smaller storylines all tie back into the larger overarching plot. That's what I'm curious about. Or is that, you know, what kind of effect this is going to have on Grace's story, and what kind of effect that's going to have on the story overall, is kind of thing. Some interesting developments. I was surprised by the Isaac thing, because I was like, oh, you didn't take the last train, but you chopped on this. I was like, what made you change your mind? Like, maybe he was hesitant. Because I wondered, did he drop the money off that night, or was it like he was about to get on that train, but he decided not to, went back, dropped the money off, and then decided to hop the train? Because when Lee woke up, she finds the money, and Isaac's like, here's your husband's money, like, okay, and she starts counting it, and I love the note, like, you're still counting it? Fuck you. She's like, fuck you, Isaac. So, has the money and everything, and talking to Alejandro, which there's a complicated thing of, like, right, her and Billy they banged it out last episode, so, you know, it's just like, he's like, yeah, I want to come down there, you know, your dad is family to me too, so I can help out. He's like, just whatever you need, you got it. And she's just kind of, okay. Obviously, she's stressing out about it, because it's like, right, which, when she got into the house that morning, like, she's from outside, like, her dad was pretending to be asleep, but his eyes were open, so I'm like, he knows. But she even, like, stuffed away Billy's jacket, and just, like, when Billy's like, oh yeah, like, you're right, like, you know, my life is my life, and he's, like, talking about, like, kind of, like, taking steps to move forward, but she's like, right, like, don't call me again, Billy, like, what happened didn't happen, you know, Isaac, you know, brought up the fact is that he saw us, and he dropped off the money, and it's like, I'm curious, because I didn't know how to interpret, like, Isaac's situation, like, why he would return the money, because I guess for him, it's like, I don't want to, like, owe you anything, it's just like, here, do whatever you want, I'm done with all of this. Maybe, I'm obviously implying, like, because that's why I was like, part of me kept wondering whether there was something more there or not. I don't know if there is, between him and Billy, like, did he have a thing for Billy or not, and, like, once again, it's like, right, because my thought last episode was like, the reason why he would be upset is because he believed the only reason why Billy was friends with him was because Lee. And it's like, right, it's like, considering everything that went wrong, it was mainly on Billy, and now I have to, like, yeah, my life had its issues and problems, but, like, what I saw, what I was a part of was because of Billy, and now it's like the two people who kind of abandoned me. It's like Billy just telling me to go, but you're like the only friend I have, and then my sister who's kind of left me to deal with my dad for the past couple years. Here you are, like, colluding, like, not colluding, but, like, canoodling, you know, not, would even canoodling be the right word? Like, obviously doing their thing. So it's a twofold, like, complex of emotions, I'm assuming, when it comes to all of that. Which, following his side of things, he's on the train, obviously, like, it's getting cold, there's no fire, and he ends up upon some other people on the train, and he's got a wrench, and he's watching them, but then, like, they stop midway through, and he's like, the guy's like, hey, man, we're good, we're not going to do anything to you. Guy grabs him, throws him off the train. Now, I don't know if that's like this is our train, like, get your own spot type of thing, or is it just kind of like, okay, we're throwing you off the train because we don't know you, and you might actually try and hurt us, maybe a combination of the two. But then Isaac proceeds to, like, afterwards pull his pants down, and from what I can tell, it seemed like he was jerking off, so that's why I was like, aspects of that made me go, like, did he always have a thing for Billy? Is that why that hurt more, seeing him and Lee together, like, on some level? Or is it, like, there's also a part of me that's like, did something actually happen between him and Billy? Like, that's what I'm like, is there some level of that? I don't know. I feel like he's not going to get far enough away from that. Either, like, something's going to push him to go back, or maybe his name will come up in the investigation and he'll be, like, arrested for something else, and then they'll basically kind of, like, God, what's the word? I'm blanking on the word, but it's basically when, like, you're basically get arrested somewhere else and they basically bring you back to where they want to prosecute you. I forgot what the term for that is. Extradite, I believe, is the word I'm thinking of. I mean, it applies, like, from country to country, but it can also apply from, like, state to state type of situation. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see what that ends up being with Isaac's story. I was so sure he was going to stick around town, but, like, no, for him to actually leave, granted, we don't know how far he actually got away, but, you know, so there's that element to things. Billy's in a position where life is kind of getting back together. It's like, right, he's now fully, like, done with his probation, and it's like, right, he's potentially getting his job back as the assistant coach, and it's like, even his parole officer being like, yeah, don't fuck this up, which is like, right, Billy's trying not to, but the day before, like, because the day everything went down with Pete was the day, like, was supposed to technically be his last day, and it's like, he kind of did screw that all up. So now it's like, okay, he's trying to, like, put that all behind him, trying not to get mixed up in all that, just because his life is finally on track. Obviously, like, with everything that Lee has to deal with, the fact is that her dad fell when he was trying to get on the toilet, and she helped him, and he got frustrated with her. And then later on, he's like, it's fine, like, you know, it was kind of like a regrettable situation for both of us. And so, like, she tries to, like, hey, like, let's not watch all this stuff on TV. He's like, what? He's like, oh, because she's like, oh, he's like, you know, oh God, what was he saying? It was like, because she was like, this is racism or whatever. He's like, yeah, if they showed if Mexicans were curing cancer, they'd show that. And she's like, well, basically, you want to put the game on, and, like, they joke about, like, you know, teams and stuff like that. He's like, oh, I thought you'd be a Yankee. She's like, just thank God I don't root for the Mets. He's like, ha 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 ha. Because he tried to be like, yeah, like, you're different, you know, I'm very proud of you. It's just kind of like, that was the very backhanded compliment. It wasn't a full-blown compliment, because it's like, it's almost like a, no, babe, don't worry about it. Like, obviously, you're a half Mexican, but it's like, you're different from them because you're my daughter. Like, no. It wasn't the compliment I think he thought it was. But then they get into, like, an argument about, like, right, she wants him to actually, it's like, can we talk about, like, a nursing situation of, like, someone taking care of you? And for her, it's, like, frustrating, because it's like, I've been sending you money. And, cause she's like, you know, I got to go back home, and, like, cause I got my classes, and I can't just be like I need to actually be there for my classes and not just, like, Skype in type of situation. And it's like, I'm trying to understand why he's so against it, why that has been an issue beforehand. Because, like, for her, it's like, Isaac's not coming back. He's like, yeah, he'll come back and stuff like that. But it's like, right, like, what you did with Mom, like, I'm not Mom. He's like, because it's like, oh, you look like her, you sound like her, but it's like, you aren't her. Because it's like, right, because you sucked the life out of Mom. He's like, don't you talk about her like that. And then you suck the life out of Isaac. It's like, we're not having this conversation. Like, you are getting, like, some care, end of discussion. Because it's like their mom, like, kept, like, him, like, taking care of him. And then after she died, it's like, he just hit a rut where he just stopped. Like, once again, he's just so, like, not, like, oh, I can take care of myself, but I guess, like, he let their mom do it, but now he won't let it. Like, that's why I'm like, why is it such a, like, once again, where has the other money she's been sitting for the past, like, months been going then? If this was the first set that Isaac took, where's the rest of it? Not unless that's supposed to be a culmination of, like, all the money he wasn't using, he kept stockpiling it. Like, not unless that's what that's supposed to be, all the money that she was sending in past 6 months. I'd assume that was just the money for this month. But I guess, like, the rest kind of paid for, like, groceries and maintenance, and not necessarily maintenance, but, like, I guess it's groceries and bills and stuff like that. So maybe that's what that paid for, and that's where the rest of the money went. But, it is a thing of, like, why he's so adamant and just so, I guess it's just supposed to be, like, who the character is, that he's so hard-headed and just, like, I can do things on my own, like, but it's like, you're not trying to, like, work with anyone on this, like, you're just being stubborn in your own ways, thinking, like, Isaac's gonna come back, but it's like, you never thanked him, you never thanked me for coming here to do long, oh, it's like, oh, thanks, it's like, no, like, you're not sincere about it, so, because he was like, oh yeah, go ahead and just go back to your New York life and just kind of leave me anyway, you know? Because it's just a lot of that underlining issues that's in that family were coming to a head in that moment. So we'll see where things kind of go from there. Which all that she's dealing with, Leaf goes over to Billy's and they do their thing. So even, it's like, that's kind of like messed up, because even Grace was saying that to Billy, like, I don't want you to get hurt. Remember, she's married, which Billy was, and I brought this up last episode, because he didn't say it last episode, he said it this episode. It's like, right, I know, so are you. It's like, despite everything, like, yeah, Billy knows kind of like, right, you're married too, and, and I think maybe that whole point, like, actually probably fills that void, like, creates that void even more inside of her, of, like, right, wanting companionship, looking at other people kind of happy together, and it's like, well, what do I want for myself, So, but at the same time, that's happening between Billy and Lee. Bobby's getting out of town, and he's calling, and he's like, right, I saw what happened, some kid, like, punched Pete, and he was like, I got hit, but then, like, when I was up, I saw Billy over, like, Pete's dead body and, like, running away. He never saw Billy with the weapon. That's why I'm like, I think it was Isaac who did it. I think Isaac's actually one that killed Pete. I think Billy punched him, and that led to all that, but I think Isaac's the one that actually killed him. Now, it could have easily been a situation where Isaac tried to protect him, and Pete almost killed was threatening to kill Isaac, and then Billy killed him but once again, they set it up to be like, oh, we already know, like, push comes to shove, Billy will go, like, he could go that far. But I think it was Isaac who did it, but, that might even be more so why, like, he's freaking out. We do also know, like, I don't think, they haven't shown it in any episode, but Dale never was able to go back and get the jacket, so it's still there, once again, with his fingerprints on it. But, so that's definitely going to be interesting. I'm curious, is at any point in time Dale going to tell Grace? It's probably no, because it's like, right, I don't want her mixed up in all of this. Because I got a tiny glimpse of the next episode, and I think that's Dale talking to Billy, I think. We only saw the person, like, from the little, that 2 seconds I saw, it was from behind, so I couldn't tell if that was Billy or Grace, but I think it might have been Billy, but it's like probably explaining, like, right, they've got you as a prime suspect now because your name got brought up, so I'm sure Dale's going to do everything he can to kind of keep Billy one step ahead of them. Like, once again, like, is he going to fill Grace in? Because, like, are we going to, like, kind of slight repeat of, like, 6 months ago in this regard? I also brought this up before. I think the doctor who runs that pharmacy, that is like, oh, you know, Dell was like, oh, you're like Mother Teresa. I think he's the one at the heart of it. I mean, because they can write scripts and stuff like that. He has access to a lot of that stuff that I'm like, I think he's playing that altruistic, like, oh, like I'm like that lady's situation. He was like, yeah, test this out, sit with your doctor. And it's like, oh, you're a saint. You know, it's like, but I think he's part of this. I think he's the heart of this issue. I'm sure he was like Bobby's or supplier and stuff like that. I think. We'll ultimately have to wait and see, but that's my immediate thought. Especially when we consider like all the pills that like Dale's supposed to be returning to him and he's throwing away. But it's like, he threw them away, but are you really throwing them away? Or maybe it's someone connected to him through. I'm thinking my money's on him. Like you always kind of got to go with the doctor character. At least if like when a drug related situation like this, especially because like he's popping up here and there throughout it all. But we'll see. I could be just reading way too much into it, but those are my inklings. So we'll ultimately have to wait and see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.